Hello, and welcome to the Cycle Starters podcast. This podcast is made just for you if you're breaking intergenerational patterns and turning ancestral wounds into creative potential, embodied joy, and intergenerational abundance. I'm your host, Heather Rebecca Wilson, and I'm passionate about ancestral healing and growth, as well as astrology and pleasure as transformative medicine. And I'm here to help you elevate your consciousness and promote joy in your life. I truly believe everyone can become a cycle starter, reshaping their lineage and fostering growth and healing. Join me as I share enlightening insights and feature inspiring guests. We're here to support you in letting go of anything that's holding you back from your fullest expression in healing, growth, and transformation. So if you are ready to be inspired on your journey of transformation and create a life that aligns with your true self, then you are in the right place. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and follow us on our social media platforms. Learn more about what I do and how I can support you along your ancestral healing journey on my website, heatherrebeccawilson.com. Please feel free to connect with me. You can DM me any topics you want to cover. Share your takeaways or send me a screenshot of your review and I will send you a thank you gift. So let's get into it. Hey, everybody. Welcome. I'm Heather, as I said, and today I have the absolute pleasure, the absolute honor to be chatting with a dear sister of mine, a kindred spirit, a soulmate. Mars Aqueous. Hi, Mars.
Hi, Heather.
I'm going to read your bio and then we'll get into our chat.
Great.
So thank you for being here.
Yes, it's so fun to be on this little journey. Yeah.
I know. This has been like coming for a long time. So I'm really excited to be doing this.
What? We've known each other 30 years now. Is that right?
Oh, God.
Mm-hmm.
That's,
yeah.
Holy crap.
And it's been coming that whole time.
Yeah, it has been 30 years. Wow. That was like a shock to hear, but it's true. Okay. So Mars Aqueous is a writer, energy worker, facilitator and ritualist, and hedge walker dedicated to remembrance, reclamation, and a collective exit from the Anthropocene. They counsel and write about the limitations and fallacies of Eurocentric models of distress and sickness, and the political dimensions of perception, madness, and sanity. Mars convenes communal spaces for unlearning and remembering exiled ancestral capacities, for dispelling generational ensorcelment, and healing the great forgetting. Their work seeks to restore our ability to interweave and collaborate with elemental beings and unseen realms, to weave a collective composting and nutritive death of the ghostly, harmful structures of modernity. Guided by ancient ancestral urgings, Mars walks with prayers on their lips and salt in their pockets, seeding blessings for a wildly disobedient and urgent reckoning with our relational responsibility to ourselves, the more than human world, and the planet.
I've never heard it read aloud. It's fun.
It's fire. It's so great.
That's what I'm doing. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I just need to take a breath after reading that.
Yeah, it's all doing the real walk. Well, not all. Yeah. Many of us.
You certainly are, and we're going to be getting into that. So
it's messy.
Yeah. I'm so excited for our conversation today. And my first question for you is, what is your ancestry, and do you feel comfortable sharing what you know about it with our community today?
Sure. A human ancestry in this lifetime is sea people, which is why I walk with salt. It's people from Estonia, from Ireland, from England. And it's, I think so much of the healing that I've done around ancestry is really widening the scope of what we mean by ancestors, right? Our ancient ancestors are fungi, single cell organisms, and So part of so much of our work really, I think, in this time is to really expand like what we think of as kin. So those are my human people. And there's so many thousands and thousands and thousands of years of wovenness, human and more than, that come before and around and beyond the collective violences and hurtings and woundedness that many of us walk with on this planet at this time.
Thank you for that. And actually, there's a word in your bio that I think is worth defining for people because it may be the first time they've ever heard the word Anthropocene. So can you give us just like a brief explanation, a simple definition of what the Anthropocene is? Because I think it speaks to, how you conceptualize your ancestry and your ancestors.
Yes, I love that. It refers to a time when humans decided that we were like the most important beings, the most evolved beings, the ones in control and sort of responsible for somehow like mastering and controlling and shaping the planet. And human supremacism really enables all other hierarchical constructs on top of it. So racialized hierarchies, class hierarchies, able-bodiedness, all of that, it's all built on a bedrock of the idea that there is such a thing as supremacism, that certain beings are better than others. And it's time for that to go. And it's going.
It is going. It is going for sure as humanity and the planet transition from 3D to 5D. That's one of the colonial frequencies that's dissolving, that is crumbling for sure. Well, so you are going to be leading a very, very exciting experience inside the Ancestral Healing Collective. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with this is my monthly membership that I designed for beings assigned female at birth, AFAB, who are wanting to transform deep ancestral wounds into creative potential, embody joy, and shifts to higher consciousness with the help of astrology and pleasure as transformative medicine. So each month, in addition to a new moon pleasure practice and dance party, I have a guest teacher lead an experience. And so it's open to folks outside of the membership. That experience and the pleasure practice, it's included in the membership. So people outside have to pay $30 to participate. So the title of your experience is called Unlearning Colonial Deceptions, Pluto's Destruction of Western Healing Paradigms and the Birth of a New Way. And I'm so freaking excited for this. This is happening on Thursday, November 14th at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific.
That's right.
And my next question for you is, how did you get to this place of sharing this offering? And I know that this is a long story.
Yeah.
What do you feel called to share about how you arrived at this is a statement that I feel comfortable making.
Yeah.
And sharing with other people.
Yeah. So 5 days after our workshop, Pluto moves into Aquarius for the next 20 years.
Yep.
And we could talk about that endlessly. The gist is that Pluto is a very slow moving planet, and you can absolutely map huge movements in human culture through Pluto's movement. So the last time Pluto was in Aquarius, the American Revolution happened, the French Revolution happened. And what I felt happening in my own life around this time, as Pluto has been kind of like doing this dance in its momentum to move into Aquarius, going back and forth between Capricorn and Aquarius, was this sense that like I was wrapping up something that I've been on for a while. And when I started looking at the transit and feeling this kind of like interesting momentum of like, I need to like, it's like my thesis or something, like I was being called to like get clear with myself around like what the journey has been. And what I see happening is that there's a massive shift happening on the planet. Modernity itself is dissolving. and it's dissolving in different ways for different people at the same time, where these structures, the Capricorn structures of legacy and these kind of like tight, rigid ways of being are dissolving in a different way right now. And at the same time, there's, since 2008, especially, what I see is this kind of like acceleration, this like frenzy of modernity's sort of like ordering of reality and obsession with categorization and fixing and sort of like getting ahead of and mastering our healing. And you've seen this rise in, you know, it's a shape that happens in most Western healing paradigms. But you can see it especially in the rise of so-called trauma-informed narratives, right? This frenzy that's happening, it's like escalation. And there's also this seeping in of this kind of watery, dissolving Neptunian energy where new ideas are sort of like cannot help but come into people's awareness. And you and I might talk about that as like 3D and 5D or colonial frequencies, these dissolving of certain ideas about the nature of reality. And this is complex work because it's actually quite destabilizing to encounter the disillusion of reality, which is why when you look back at even quantum physicists who have been, you know, navigating what it actually means, the research that they're doing, they can't quite figure out what that actually means in real life. But you can see healing paradigms that are doing that exact thing, where we're questioning what it means to be a body, what a body is, what the agency of all beings, whether they are in bodies that we recognize or not, the dissolving of the sort of like atomized ideas of objectivity, dissolving of the colonial progress narratives, this idea that like things move in a particular way that like gets better and better over time. And like these are new, very recent constructs in human culture that are dissolving. And probably under that is my own journey around being like deeply psychiatrized and harmed by my interventions, by the so-called healing interventions of this basically state agents. I mean, let's be real, agents of the state who are put in positions to support people to heal. And what I see is that Western culture is basically like just depriving people, like the structure of our culture is such that we're depriving people of the normal and absolutely necessary growth and waking up and becoming grown-ups, stewarding our responsibilities, that we were deprived of those opportunities. And what happens then? People don't have awakening opportunities. There's nowhere to go to actually do the dissolving that's necessary. And then we think that the same paradigms that are creating harm and extractive violence and omnicide, right, the killing of all the things, we think that those paradigms are the ones that are going to help us heal. I mean, it's complete delusion. So some of what's going in my own process of looking at this timeline in my life and all that I've learned, and wow, I wish I knew it before, you know, and also noticing the way that's dovetailing with Pluto moving into Aquarius 5 days after the workshop that we do, and the sort of like birth of what I believe to be a new innovation, collective power, people really understanding the nature of our power and the embodied dignity and sovereignty to change this planet.
This is going to be so powerful. I'm so excited. I've gotten like a little preview of this workshop. Right. Mars has been sharing the slides with me, and I am so pumped. I'm so proud of you. This is going to be amazing. And where I want to take the conversation now is looking at, as much as you feel comfortable sharing, your own ancestral healing journey. So what has that been like so far for you? Because I do think it helps other people to listen to other people's stories around this, because I do think that ancestral healing, number one, is largely unfamiliar to most people. And then the folks that have heard about it, they find it really intimidating because it's full of ups and downs. It's not for the faint of heart. An ancestral healing journey can be physically painful.
Yes.
Right? So we would be lying to say, oh, it's just, stars and rainbows and la, la, la. No, it's not that. So much beauty and healing comes out of it, but there are lots of ups and downs along the way. So can you share a little bit about your ups and downs and basically what your unique journey has been like so far?
Yeah. There are some phases. So the first phase of it was that I was found myself sort of desperate for support when I was around 19. I was living in a place, I was going to college, living in a place where I was in nature for the first time in a different way, very natural setting, and started like hearing and being in connection with realms that I didn't understand. There was more information coming in than I knew how to process, and sort of compounded with longstanding addiction patterns that are definitely in both of my family of origins, and longstanding all kinds of unhealed, this lifetime childhood trauma and things like this, away for the first time going to college. So it's a normal moment to be growing and needing support. I ended up reaching for help in what ended up being the wrong place, which was, a psychologist's office. And over a period of time, I made the mistake of telling them what I was experiencing, and the labels that I received at that time are not particularly helpful. Long story short, I ended up saying yes to be put on psychiatric medication. It this happens to a lot of us who engage with Western paradigms where there's a kind of cocktail effect, right? Where oh, you're not responding to, or now you have mania, so we're going to put you. So first it was SSRIs, and then it was, oh, now you have mania, we're going to put you on mood stabilizers, and oh, now you can't, you're not really, there's something still wrong. Let's try this other thing, benzodiazepines, additional SSRIs, things for sleeping, things to help you wake up because you're not sleeping well. I mean, around 2008, I was sicker than I had been before. It's sort of sicker than I had been before. Absolutely attempting suicide. Suicidal ideation is nothing compared to actual. I mean, it's not nothing. It's more it was a thread of my life that I was very accustomed to, feeling like I don't want to be here. I didn't consent to be here. This sort of non-consensual relationship with my livingness. And that all got really accelerated the more medication I took. And getting off psychiatric medication is much more complex than most practitioners understand. And I actually had practitioners tell me that they wouldn't help me get off of them. They weren't willing to continue to see me for therapy if I wasn't medicated. So it was sort of I went them saying well, I'm willing to help you, a psychiatrist willing to help you get off these meds, but you can just do it over a couple period of 2 weeks, And so I ended up finding a lot of support at that time in peer groups, online people. And there's so many resources I'd love to share, when we do the workshop for people going through something like this. But there's sort of there's these underlying things that are looking to be healed in our lives. And then there's the layer of support that sometimes actually creates more perturbation of the pathways of the nervous system. I wasn't learning to really process the feelings and complicated emotional states that were going on for me. It was just kind of suppressed. And, psychiatric medication is compared to what we would call street drugs, right? They have such a different half-life. They stay in your body and continue to perturb your neurochemistry for a really, really, really long time. And I wish that more people had a lot more information and options. And it's complicated with how insurance works and, the access that we have, if we even have insurance, to getting the sort of like first line. And if you go on to Google right now and ask, I'm suicidally depressed, like what will you receive? Like the traditional treatment for that is medication and therapy, talk therapy. So this is the first round. Essentially, I supported myself with tons of peers and all kinds of resources. Mad movement was happening at that time, especially because of speaking of Pluto in Capricorn, the financial crisis and the austerity measures that were happening as a result of that, people losing health insurance, losing access to tools. And so there was a lot of movement around collective, peer support and, helping each other at that time. So I was lucky enough to find a lot of community support. I learned started learning about, healing, emotional, like peer support and emotional healing, and learning to be with my feelings, and moved to Portland, Oregon, and started a new life. And there's lots of stuff in there, but, basically I thought just the getting off the medication was like going to feel a lot better. And I did end up feeling a lot better, but then had to deal with the stuff that was actually under the medication. So getting off the medication becomes like its own healing project. And then once you're off of it, then you have to deal with the actual stuff that was there in the first place, that was coming up that was emerging as an initiation in the first place, right? So we squelch it down, and then you have to get off the medication to actually come back up to some semblance of sovereignty. And then you have to unlearn all the sort of victimization and sickness consciousness that comes from being in those spaces where people are telling you like there's something wrong with your brain, or you have, whatever the story is that you're receiving as a patient in the mental health system. You have to unlearn all that also to actually reconnect to the sense that like you have agency to change, and what else is healing, at the core, but this sense that like there's a spirit that we can be connected to, whatever you call it, heaven, our, our higher self, like what the movement that wants to come through us, our true nature, and that we're dissolving and healing these things that are kind of like blocking us from being in our center, being in stewarding our spirit in a good way in this lifetime. So I started learning about trauma in maybe 2013, trained a ton in neuroscience and, trauma healing, polyvagal theory, and blah, 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 all the things. And I was so excited because I thought this would change everything, and I was so excited for other people to learn, that there's no separation between the body and the mind, that the body is holding these patterns, compensations, and, starting to unlearn some of that weird, like body mind split that happens in Western culture. And I thought after that, like I started feeling actually really good, processing all kinds of, my grandmother's material and my mother's material. I was also learning family constellations at that time, which is a really, really helpful way of sort of seeing the distributed system of pain that can live in both family systems and any system you can use constellations for. So doing a lot of, immigration trauma and loss of land and work and, understanding my racialization as a European heritage person, learning about, the transition to capitalism and the suppression of wovenness and lifeways and the enclosure of land and like these, legacies that created and have created the harm that is the technologies of subjugation that are so at play in our world right now. That learning and understanding, that was a huge piece of my ancestral healing journey, really understanding that process of loss of land and suppression of these ways of knowing that kept us well, walking in land that is not owned by anyone, that the names of the medicines, and you have sovereignty to create healing, and your body isn't yet mechanized by wage trading our time for hours, which is part of, trading our time, hourly wage for trading our time for money, which is part of how we get kind of mechanized in current economic structure we're in. So that was a huge part of my healing, and I really felt pretty good. And then in around 2019 or 2018, I started to feel not that great in my body. Like I was tired, and I just did all the normal things. Oh, I'm drinking too much caffeine, and I'm using cannabis too much, and I'm probably in a job I don't really love. But over time, I became like much more sick, and one thing after another, Epstein, chronic illness diagnoses, Epstein-Barr, and mast cell activation, and POTS, and I couldn't eat, and I couldn't walk, and I started using a cane, like got quite sick. And then the pandemic happened, and when getting COVID for me a couple of times, like really was a disabling event. Became much sicker after getting COVID, and sort of an acceleration of all of these, chronic illness diagnoses. And it was so kind of alarming. I was in resistance. I'm just going to be super real. I was in resistance to how bad it was. Like I just kept thinking, like, I just need to heal my gut. I just need to, stop drinking so much coffee. I feel tears coming. It's like that was so not what was happening. I started to feel that that this was like just another layer of massive detox, that my body was saying, like, there is something in here that is not you, and we need to get it out,
Mm-hmm.
And I encountered, I had already been doing all kinds, sort of like some of what I'll share in the workshop around like really expanding what we mean when we say like my body, right? Like where your body starts and ends, really honoring the energetic fields, the complexity of all kinds of beings that we live among and with, and that we're in collaboration with, that are not in bodies that we are trained in Western culture to recognize. They don't have organs, and they don't have skin in the way that we understand. And so I went into, and I'm still in it, a kind of reshaping the story that I'm telling about like what sickness even is, basically. Part of what has occurred in the rise of the sort of like modernities, the thought forms that we currently in Western culture like understand the concept of reality, right? Is that the things that we can see with a microscope are real, and the things that we can't see without a microscope are not real. But it's actually so much more complex than that. And working with detoxing my body and staying super neutral around these shapes that we have around in Western culture around disease, right? Like this is mast cell activation, and your body has parasites, your gut has parasites, or your blood is not moving around. You have blood deficiency. It's not moving around. All of these things. And every time you get some kind of diagnostic label, whether or not the extent to which it's helpful for you or not really depends on how that idea of sickness like lives in you. And part of what I'm doing now is relating to all of it as like, it's like I'm unchecking genetic boxes. It's like I'm detoxing what is not mine. That includes my mother's unmetabolized pain that I have made agreements with since I was probably in the womb, if not before that, around like being the sponge or the one who would absorb a particular thing. And when you start looking at systems, not just family systems, but energetic fields and bodies, and the way that we merge and make arrangements with other beings, in order to hold and exist in chaos and dysfunction. And so it's not just childhood trauma, and it's not just like epigenetic trauma, right? This idea that we can see the rings in people's DNA sheet for 14 generations. It's like, that's real. But when I talk about ancestral healing, like these energies come to be healed when there is space and availability and willingness for them to be healed. So I don't know what these energies are. I don't know that they're my grandmother's, or, the story doesn't even matter. Where I'm at now is that in the last year, it's like I've been pulled into, I'm going to call it non-consensual, but like very sort of surprising levels of depth and kind of underworld navigating, where I'm seeing things in the field that I didn't know were in the field. Seeing like demon portals under the house I grew up in, seeing layers, it's like these like terrestrial layers of pain and unmetabolized ghosts of the legacy of violence that has happened on this planet. And so it's not just my family and the place where we lived. It's like acceleration of death that has happened in the modern era because of modern warfare technologies, and the sort of like the escalation of that, and the suppression of ways of relating with the dead that are, alive and well in most other cultures on this planet, around like making offerings and making sure that the dead are well stewarded when they move into the next realm. And many of us are living ghosts ourselves, right? Not taking up our full body. And when you are not in your body, somebody else will be. And that is another way of talking about what illness actually is. So I'm still in it. It's not just my ancestry, my human, this lifetime ancestry, and getting attached to diagnostic frameworks can really limit like what's available for change.
This is a very, very powerful energetic transmission. I know that this is just a slice of it, and you're going to share so much more in your workshop. And I'm so excited for that. Thank you for sharing all of that. Also, for people who might be interested in participating, right, in experiencing your medicine in this workshop that's happening on November 14th, what advice would you give them in order to best prepare to get the most out of this experience?
It's an invitation to consider that there's so much more going on than we've been led to believe. There's so much more happening in the field than we in this culture have mostly been encouraged to notice. And when we expand our ability to see and sense the subtle energies that are around us and in us, and begin to work and play with it as a field, as opposed to this like, I'm here and I'm me and these things are happening in me, and then that's the world out there. But really expanding into a field of play. It's like it's a distributed system. And when we do that, so much more becomes possible. And so it's really just an invitation to come and imagine what it might be like to reconceptualize what sickness is, what me is, letting go of these ideas of the sort of separation of bodies. And I would say being willing to encounter some probably like pretty unpopular opinions about the rise of trauma-informed like fuckery. Honestly, like so much of what's happening in Instagram therapists and the weird churn that capitalism creates when there's some new idea and people hungry for healing. And so it's a lot of that kind of like understanding the nature that how our perception has been deeply sculpted by really sick ghosts, forces that are unwell, and people who are interested and ready to reconnect to their actual sight, clear sight, full bellies, rounded bodies, and encountering the actual nature of reality. And we do that in community on purpose, right? We're not meant to dissolve like our perception of reality alone. Because in this culture where that might be, those kinds of awakenings, like someone becomes a shaman in another culture. Here they get put into a psychiatric hospital, like me, like my mother, like my grandmother, like my uncle. Like these are initiations and awakenings, and we can structure collective ways of being with these unlearnings and new possibilities when we do it together.
This is going to be so good. I love it. And you're sharing so much embodied wisdom here.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, thank you for sharing all of this. So, okay, so I want to change the conversation slightly. I know that we started talking about Pluto, right? Pluto and Capricorn, finally moving into Aquarius permanently very soon. I think like right after the US election, that's going to happen.
Yeah.
So yeah, we were talking about Pluto. And then, for those of you who are unfamiliar with what Pluto represents in Western astrology, Pluto's the destroyer. Pluto is all about power dynamics. And when we look at Pluto's placement in our own natal chart, it shows us like what we don't want other people to see about us.
Yeah.
It's about deep transformation. It's about shadow work. And it's a generational planet. And so both Mars and I were born in the Pluto and Libra generation. And so the work that we're doing in this life as a generation is around how we relate to one another, right? To reconceptualize relationships and partnerships and how we relate to one another. And also we're destroying the idea that healing is pretty or always is pretty, right? Because Libra, being ruled by Venus, the goddess of love, money, pleasure, and beauty, that's what she represents. But healing ain't always pretty. Yeah. And I think you and I are doing that in this conversation, which is so cool. But yeah, that's the Pluto and Libra generation. So I want to talk a little more astrology. Yes. And where I want to go now is, do you feel comfortable sharing your sun, moon, and rising sign with our community? Do you know them off the top of your head?
I do. Okay. Yeah. My rising sign is Taurus, and my moon is Scorpio, and my sun is Capricorn.
All right. So you have an Earth rising, that's fixed Earth, Taurus, also ruled by Venus, the goddess of love and money and pleasure. So Taurus is very sensual and in the body, of the body, loves to ground, garden, all that kind of stuff. So that makes a lot of sense based on what I know of you. And the rising sign basically is, your perception of reality, but it's also the vehicle for your divine mission in this life. And it's the people that you're meant to serve. Those are the qualities they see in you that they would like to develop in themselves. So, most people don't know that you and I went to many dances together as teenagers and did a lot of dancing, over the years in your kitchen and many different spaces. And you're probably like one of my favorite people to dance with ever. Yeah. But yeah, Taurus is about like being in the body and embodiment. And so I really feel like that is in line with what you're sharing, your medicine now. So that's super cool.
Yes. And such a process, because I was born with a conjunction of Chiron, literally on the ascendant. So it's a wound in this lifetime that I came here to heal around existence itself.
Yes.
Right. So being willing to be here
in the body,
and to say yes to this life and to be practicing, to be practicing. Thank you so much. Noticing and acknowledging what actually makes our lives possible.
Yeah.
The sun and I mean, it's like such a miracle, such a fleeting miracle that, for those of us who struggle with really intense, suicidality and things like that, learning to really genuinely say yes and choose again and again to stay. It's a whole thing.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Yeah. The fact that you have Chiron conjunct the ascendant is a
Yeah.
huge deal
Yeah.
because your Chiron is part of your life path too. It's like your deepest wounds, which are often ancestral, shows up with Chiron, and it's also your healing powers when you say yes to walking this path.
Yeah.
So,
There's a
then the first house, which is where your ascendant, the first house begins, with your ascendant, depending on the house system you're using. But your
yeah.
first house is the house of the body, the house of the self. So, even when people first meet you, they know about that. They pick up on
Yeah.
this,
Yeah.
right? It's like very much on your sleeve
Yeah.
and it's part of your identity. So yeah, that's a huge deal. So, okay, so Taurus rising, and
Yeah.
then you are a Capricorn sun.
Right.
So that's more earth. So it's like
Yeah.
fixed earth, and you have cardinal earth. So you got a lot of earth.
Yes, and so many planets in Capricorn, so just a
Yeah.
lot of emphasis on that Earth sign.
You
Mars,
have a lot of, you have a
heaven,
stellium
stellium. Yeah.
in
Yeah.
Capricorn. Okay. Well, I mean, Capricorn is that high achiever, that
Yeah.
worker bee, but it's also a feminine sign. I think most people don't realize that from the waist up. Capricorn is that mountain goat that climbs the highest heights, but is a fish from the waist down, has a fish tail, right? So Capricorn has an emotional side, right? And you will be unable to achieve all that you are meant to achieve with the Capricorn sun if you don't schedule time to take care of your emotional side, to take care of your watery side. So
Yeah.
as much as you shine in your work and your ability to produce, it can be bad for you. You can burn out. You know this. I mean, this
Yeah.
is so much part of your
So much
story.
part of the story. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, just
Um,
fueling myself to push through the masks, the competency mask, and the wanting to be seen and valued for the basically valued, exchanging my right to exist for external validation of you are doing good things, you are good, you are
right.
delivering, you are good. It's obsessive.
And then you have the Scorpio moon, this
Yeah, then stellium in there too.
the fixed
Woo!
water.
Yes, Venus and Uranus and stellium in there too, right? Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Scorpio is fixed water. Water
Yeah.
represents our emotions, our feelings, our sentiments. And when I tune into fixed water, it's deep emotional sensitivity. And in its highest expression of Scorpio, that would be balanced with logic. But the low expression of Scorpio is like being vengeful, and lashing out, but in a way as like a protective measure because Scorpio is so sensitive. But the archetypal energy I associate with Scorpio is really that attentive detective. Scorpio loves to do research. They are born with a PhD, it seems like, in psychology, right? They just have this natural understanding of the human psyche. And I love how there's nothing taboo for a Scorpio. Like
Oh yeah.
I have so much fun with my Scorpio
I love the
friends
truth.
because we can talk. You love the truth, right? Like we talk, we can talk about anything, right? Nothing's off the table, and we can, really engage in like a lot of dark humor, but we don't
Yeah.
live there, like we
Yes.
can go there, but
Yeah.
it's all good. So I really appreciate that scorpionic ability to go really deep. I think that's the special sauce of Scorpio, the way I see
Yes.
it. But what's it been like to have this Scorpio moon? So the moon is your emotions and your ancestral wounds, and specifically what you are responsible for giving to yourself in order
Yep.
to feel at home and centered in your own energy. So
Yep.
what have you learned over the course of your life around doing your moon specifically?
Oof, I love
What,
that question.
yeah, like how do you take care of your emotional self, your emotional life?
Yeah. that was such a learning curve that, of course, like our astrology sets us up for the things that we're going to explore in this lifetime, right? My emotional life was so chaotic, and I didn't learn how to be with it at all. By the time I got put on medication, like that isn't a recipe for learning how to be with your emotions. It's a way of like putting a kind of blanket and a structure in place from the top down to keep you sort of semi-functional, right? But learning to really be with my emotional experience. And also, I would say, and going to the depths, and I do, like, I have to be with my emotional experience every morning when I wake up. Every morning I wake up, and it's remembering I'm in a body, remembering that I'm, this vast being that's in a human body. And there's only so much space, especially when you don't realize how big your body can actually be. So emotions can really overwhelm us when we don't know how to expand with them. And so part of what I realized, I would say there's two things aside from just like creating space in my life to tend to my emotional experience, which is so a part of how I roll. One is relating to feelings as beings, right? They're not mine and they're not mine. They're currents and they have their own life, and you play with them as one being meeting another being. And when we get too possessive of like my sadness, or it just becomes like it's weird. Like it doesn't have to be like that. So relating to feelings as beings and noticing the difference between the emergence of a fresh moment of a feeling versus the emergence of a familiar loop that is hooking you. And starting to practice that kind of subtle energetic sensing that allows us to go like, hey, wait, this feels a little loopy. This feels a little ghosty. This feels a little like it's got a momentum that's going to like pull me into something versus like the existence of like fresh grief.
Right.
Fresh moment of connecting to what you love that's being desecrated. And so really honoring the wisdom of emotion and noticing that emotion is one of the vehicles for ghosts to essentially have their way with you. And I don't mean that like certain emotions are bad and certain emotions are good, but emotions, like the frequency of emotions and the frequency of the beings of that, being itself, is that some emotions are more sticky.
Yeah.
They move, they do a little bit of this, right? They're magnetic, they're yin, they pull and they tighten and they grab. And some emotions are fleeting and we try to hold on to them, right? Oh, I want to hold on to that joy. Give me that, And so it's starting to really relate to them feelings as they have their own beingness, their own energy. They're not always ours. Sometimes they're ours, but nothing is only ours and not ours, right? So really spaciousness around tending to the reality of them, and the sense that you can also just be, kind of like one of my teachers gave me this metaphor once that was so useful, like a bull, like a big bull just chewing slowly in a tornado. And the bull is just slowly chewing. That there's a center.
Well, I love what you just shared. I think there's so much wisdom in it, because I do think that we can get overly attached to our emotions, right? Like my sadness or my anger, or don't try to take my anger away from me, right? Like it's crazy making, literally, when you overly identify, right? This is just how I am, right? That's a prison that we put ourselves in.
Yes.
Because, all the water signs are extremely psychic and intuitive. You're Scorpio moon. You are super psychic, super intuitive, and super sensitive. You feel things very, very deeply. And I know we've had conversations about like, when you've been wronged by somebody, like they gone.
I will paint over you.
Yeah, I will paint over you, right? It's like never again.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like it's
Yes.
dramatic.
Yes. And that's some back to the beingness of feelings, this that they in some way, like, everything wants connection. That's the nature of entanglement, relational entanglement. Like, they want to be known, and the way that feelings, as an example, can move in a system is that, like, when things become disowned by certain people, some of us in a system might decide that we're going to let our bodies be ruled by, we're going to meet that feeling that doesn't have any way else to be met.
Mm-hmm.
And so that, like, noticing, like, who's, even just having your first question be, whose feeling is this?
Yeah.
What do they want?
Mm-hmm.
How can I dance with them? Is this a loop or a fresh feeling? Like, there's like so much questions.
I love it.
Yeah.
This is such good guidance, I
Yeah.
think, for people
Yes.
who are still trying to figure this out.
Oh,
And I think
yes. We
there are
don't learn
many,
this.
many people still trying to, get a hold of their emotional life. So
Yes.
this is like super valuable what you're sharing.
Yeah.
So tell me, what are you working on now that you're super excited about? I know we have this
Mm.
workshop coming up on the 14th,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
But is there anything else you want to talk about that
Yes.
you're jazzed about right now?
Yes. I'm really feeling I want to convene a space, probably a digital space, to build our movement ancestor altars. So
Mm,
this sense that, like, what we were talking about at the beginning, that how often do we get invited into considering our own mortality in a real way? So that's part of what's occurred for me in this moment of mast cell activation and, like, intense allergy responses. Like, I literally thought I was going to die and have gone to the hospital many times in the last year with
mm,
my throat closing. And so encountering my own mortality and noticing what it's like to imagine dying, like really dying, in a way
mm.
that's different from wishing to die and attempting to kill myself in my earlier years. Now that I actually want to be here, it's real interesting to be encountering the specter of death. There's a hope that most of us have that we'll be welcomed into heaven or into the next life. And actually, this was inspired by Anjali Nathupadhyay, her
Mm-hmm.
Twitter. She has this amazing invitation in her emails. And something really hit me with, like, who are the ancestors, human and more than, who are holding the same vision as me for the transformation of consciousness and the change on this planet? And how can I be in good relationship with them and inviting their wisdom to be with me day and night, so that when I die, whenever that is, that there's a sense that I was living my integrity every single moment, you know? And so I want to hold maybe like a 3-session, like maybe like a solstice, maybe like pre-solstice, like the beginning of December, like
Mm-hmm.
a 3-session ritual container where we're connecting with our, more than human and human ancestors who are with us in these quests, who are with us in the revolution, who are with us in the change that we want to see, and then building an altar over that period of time to them that can sustain you. And that we all have, many of us have altars that we work with every day, but we can have other altars, right, that are like, right, where you put your offerings in the morning and you connect with the ancestors. Please help me be strong, be in my integrity today, because living in this realm is like no joke. The level of hygiene you have to do to keep your perception clear around, like, what actually fucking matters.
Yeah.
So, and I'm also planning on launching a little project that is, I'm not sure totally what it is yet, but it's called the School of Awe. And it's really about practicing, connecting, and acknowledging what is actually true about the miraculousness of being in a body for a very short little walk here. And it feels like more like a collective, like a mutual aid collective, possibly free practice offering collective altar or something that is hatching in me.
I love it. All right. Well, so this is the Cycle Starters podcast, as you know. And
Yes.
so before we wrap, I have to ask you, what new cycles are you starting in your lineages, right? What seeds are you planting that will positively impact your living descendants or the descendants yet to come? What are the new cycles that you're starting?
One seed is the continual remembering and practice of relational entanglement here in this realm and maybe beyond, that there is no away. Our trash doesn't go away. The bad feelings we don't want to hold on to, they don't go away. Everything that is in existence is already always here, and it will already always be here. And so part of our task, I think, what I'm planting for my lineage descendants, for the beings seen and unseen, is that like I see you and I will tend to all, and take it seriously that pain and ghosts need attention. They don't, you don't just sort of, I mean, there's a lot of like banishing that happens, especially in new age kind of energy work, right? Like we're just, I'm not holding on to that. I'm sending you back to source. You know, it's like, okay. And it's very real that like we have sovereignty around, like, you know, we get to keep our coherence in our energetic field.
Yeah.
And there's no away. And so what does it mean on a planet that is on fire, where we're killing all the things, where violence and land theft and slavery and colonialism, it's like, what does it mean to actually like heal on a planet that is sick? You know, being with the reality and asking questions like, what is actually being called for in this reality? Like, is it in my integrity to just like live a good life? You know, live my little good life and, you know, buy my little like house and then buy guns when people start to get too hungry, that they're like coming for my food. You know, it's like, this is what we're navigating. So asking real questions, because I believe that I chose to come here. Let's put it that way. I chose to come here. Why did I choose to come? That's the question that's being asked for in this lifetime. Why are you here at this moment? And what will you do now that you're awake? You know, how will you take action? And we all learn to take action in different ways, but it's something about that. And maybe another piece of the seed is that I'm not so much of the trauma informed Western like psychosis, frankly, around like healing paradigms, is this obsession with and this delusion of like the right to safety, right? And that is, last time I checked, like the opposite of the reality that we're actually living in, not because of the astounding omnicide and colonial violence, but just because of the nature of reality, is there is only practicing being with what's actually true. And so building containers where we can practice complexity, holding difference, holding the dissolving of ideas. Like we do not live in a time anymore where we can just convince everyone to believe the same thing. Like that's not how healing happens. So planting seeds for like really practicing collective ways of holding the level of complexity and chaos and unraveling that we're in, and continue and supporting each other to ask, how am I asked to be of service so that I will be welcomed and claimed by my ancestors? when I die.
Ugh. Oh my gosh. You're so brilliant. Thank you
So
for
fun to talk to you.
sharing. Oh my God. I love talking to you. Obviously, we talk every week. Yeah. And I loved, walking this earth with you for the past
Yes,
30 years. It has been
yes,
like
yes, we're here together.
the most fun. The most fun. I mean, seriously. It's been so great. You're such a blessing in my life, and I'm
Same
so
there.
proud of you. I'm really, really proud of you. Thank you for saying yes to doing the podcast. Thank you for saying yes to leading this experience
Yeah.
for the members of the collective. But this experience, Mars's workshop, it's called Unlearning Colonial Deceptions, Pluto's Destruction of Western Healing Paradigms, and the Birth of a New Way. This is
Really,
happening on Zoom on
yes.
Thursday, November 14th at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. The energy exchange is $30 if you're not a member of the Ancestral Healing Collective. If you want to learn more about the Ancestral Healing Collective, just go to heatherrebeccawilson.com and I will put, all the links in the description below. But Mars, if people want to find out more about you, how to work with you, where should they go at this point?
Probably, I'm not very active on Instagram, but it's the place that you can find the most of my writing and
Okay.
stay in touch with me. I imagine maybe I'll be more active on Instagram at some point, but Mischief Mars is my Instagram handle.
All right. I'll put it in the description below this
Okay.
video.
Great.
So thank you. I love you. You're amazing. This has been so much fun, and we're going to do this again.
Yeah. So good to be with you.
So good to be with you.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you on the next episode of the Cycle Starters podcast. All right. Take care.
Bye.